you might not have a great leader at work. Be the leader that you want to have. Stress is just simply having too much to do and not enough time, or not having the empowerment to do it. Time is the coin of your life, so spend it wisely lest you let others spend it for you.
Tony van der Kerkhof shares an incredible journey that spans living in China, where he learned Mandarin, traveling the world, raising 2 boys, working in corporate, starting 4 businesses, and ultimately achieving the life of his dreams, all by the age of 35. Now, Tony is on a mission to educate and inspire others so that when their defining moment comes, they make the right choice, propelling them towards their best future. Tony, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Brad. Good to be here.
So before we dive in, for those who are just tuning into this episode, if there was one thing you'd like them to leave knowing, what would it be?
That it's never too late and it's never too early.
I like that. It's never too late and it's never too early. This gives us a whole lot of hope. So let's dive in. Tell us a little bit about who you are and your background.
My name's Tony van der Kerkhof. I just a southeast Melbourne boy, grew up in Narre Warren out in the suburbs, nowhere special, from no family of import. Went to school in the area, ended up leaving home at 19, moving to China, and deciding that was where I wanted to spend 4 years of my life. And I think from there, my life just became a sequence of events.
This episode is brought to you by Start With Values. If you'd like to reduce stress and increase fulfillment in your work and life, then check out startwithvalues.com. There, you'll be able to download the Values app, which helps you to discover your core values and bring them to life through micro habits. There is a values course so that you can learn about the science and practice of core values, and you'll be able to pre-register for my forthcoming book called Start With Values. I hope that these tools will enable you to achieve more fulfillment and make more meaningful decisions on your journey of life. Now back to the episode.
The best way I've described it, I've found, is there's that sequence from Tarzan in the Disney animated movie where he's swinging from vine to vine to vine, and then turns out one vine's a snake. Let's go, grabs something else, slides down a tree, vine breaks, doesn't matter, carries it, goes somewhere else. So I just find that my journey's been a bit like that, where things have happened, haven't expected it, and just rolled with it. And that's, I guess, what's led me to write this book, with the core premise being IFTTT.
Very nice. Before we explore the book, what was life like as a 19-year-old in China?
Pretty hilarious, super naive, and the part of China I was in, it was a very unique city, insofar that it had lots of money, just not very many people, or yes, education, but not many other foreigners. So you'd be walking down the street and the reactions would be pretty insane, because there might be 50 Westerners in a city of 2 million. The streets were, I don't want to say paved with gold, but they were built with oil money. So there's these beautiful wide streets and very few cars in them when I first started living there. And over time, in that 4 years, you really saw how rapid the pace of development was, where they did not have limitations on themselves like, oh, no, this should take 10, 15 years to do. It was more like, we need this yesterday, and how are we going to make that happen? So I loved the mindset there about not really putting limitations on themselves and trying to find the best way to get things done in the shortest amount of possible time, and the catch-up theory. But yeah, I really did learn how to be accepting of other cultures. It's a word for it, probably just embedding myself in that, because I didn't have many other Westerners around. So I had Chinese friends, and yeah, it was the immersion and lack of ability of having many people to speak English to that ended up getting me learning Chinese. So
wow, what an adventure. I thought I was brave leaving at 19 and landing in the UK, but China must have just been it must have blown your mind. It's so different, especially in a city that's been built in preparation for people to come and inhabit it. It's quite an interesting concept.
Yeah, the city, because it was built literally around an oil field, you would have apartment, oil pump, apartment, public park, oil pump in the public park, apartment. So they didn't waste space either.
Wow, what a place. So
Yeah.
you've written a book and it's called You Are Your Biggest Problem, and that's fantastic. Clear and easy steps for building the life of your dreams. Why are we our biggest problem?
Honestly, it's back to that point in China. We're our own limitation,
Mm,
and we're always one or two decisions away from achieving the goals we need to achieve. And it's funny how life brings these things into focus. For myself, people go, "Oh my God, everything that's on your plate. Where do you find the time to do that?" Well, my boys go to Chinese school on a Sunday from 9:30 to about 12:15. During that time, I drop them off and I head to the local supermarket or mall, and at that place is a Starbucks, and I would sit down, and that was my routine. I'd sit down and I'd start writing. And it's a matter of time. And oftentimes it's we who tell ourselves, oh, this is taking so long, it's going so slow, and we give up. It's not even the outside pressure. We give up, we tell ourselves it's not possible, we tell ourselves we don't know how to do it. And I just think coming from the property industry, where I hear people as a background, that's my pay the bills background, where people always complain, oh, the older generations, they had all this cheap property, and here we are paying overs, paying heaps for property that's much smaller and not as great. Our generation has access to all the knowledge of everybody ever at our fingertips. So in terms of a fair trade, I think it's a fair trade.
mm.
Ethel can have her cheap block of land. I'll take a billion voices, all with, information and valuable things to share over that any day.
A billion voices plus AI, which
Yeah, now.
yeah, augments that quite incredibly. You're right. So it's our own self-imposed limitations that often hold us back.
That's right. That's right. And that's why we're our biggest problem.
Mm, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. You mentioned IFTTT. Perhaps you can walk us through what that's all about.
Yeah, sure. So there is actually an app on Google and Android where IFTTT allows you to make certain smart devices communicate together. So, for example, you can. This is how I came across the concept. It's a programming concept. IFTTT is a conditional statement, so you can make it so that if a certain level of dimness or darkness hits a room, then a light will turn on or something. So you can set up these conditional statements. If the temperature in a room hits a certain temperature, then this particular smart device will turn on to cool down the room. So when I was looking into smartifying my house, I was like, this statement, like if this, then that, something about it just really resonated. And then it was years later when I started writing the book, I went, if people just applied that concept of if this, then that, that would probably change their lives in terms of having a really clearly and simply defined next step. And someone actually challenged me on this and said, well, does your book tell people what the next step is? And I said no, because that next step is different for everybody. But yes, there should be a framework, and I personally believe that framework should be couched in love for self, love for others, and doing what feels in your gut to be the right thing. And that's different for everybody. It's not my place to tell people what that is, but to just first identify what that is. If this, then that, and just go through the sequence of events on what you can control. Once you run out of those, what you can influence. Once you run out of those, then looking at alternative options.
I like how you've integrated the sphere of influence model there, because often people's attention and energy is wasted on so many things way beyond our circle of control, whether for real or imaginary. And what you're saying is if you just write down the options that are really available to you that you can control, then basically just apply that statement and do something rather than do nothing.
Oh, 100%. If it's something you can do in the next 7 days, that's in your sphere of control. If
Mm.
it's something that is not going to happen in the next 7 days, or it requires the assistance of someone else, that's influence. So don't stress or spend too much time there. Step it back into your circle of control. So a good example was last week to finish the book, and I've done this every year for the last 3 years. I've gone to Bali and spent a week there to finish a project. So last year I finished creating an app under Victor Delta Kilo. It's on Android and Apple. There's also a web-based platform, and that's a delivery system for me to help other finance brokers improve their businesses. And now that's evolved over the last 12 months as I've been writing this book. Every time I go there, it's a case of I'm here to get things done. And I only reward myself with, say, a party or a cigar at the end of the day if I've hit my objectives. And that could be a flaw of mine, where I really have to feel like I deserve relaxation to allow myself to relax. Last week was the first time I allowed a friend to come with me, and he's a very impressive individual. We've known each other for 21 years, but just to reconnect over the last couple of years and see what he's doing in life was inspiring. He's in the Air Force. He won an award on Australia Day for conspicuous service. He's a squadron leader, and so he and I were talking, and I was talking more about the business side of things, and he was getting really inspired, and he was talking more about leadership and what got him to winning that award, and it inspired the absolute snot out of me. I was like, well, tell me more. And so he'd say, all right, this is what you do, this is what you do. And immediately I'm like, I can implement that now. And so we'd go to the gym in Bali that day because, we were talking about achieving fitness goals. And he goes, well, it's just turning up every time, no matter how you feel. And it's funny because we know it, but then it's the actual implementation side where we go, oh yeah, all right, it's hit home now. I can do that.
A lot of people feel guilty giving themselves permission to go and do something like that, dedicate a little bit of time to their own personal development or to focus on something that's important to them. But ultimately, as I'm sure you experienced, it's completely worthwhile. What are your thoughts on actually creating that little bit of dedicated, immersive, deep work space?
It's so vital. It's so vital. So I speak to my staff and my people about environmental triggers. So one thing that really blurred the lines for us in Victoria with the COVID response was having to work from home. And so everyone's environmental triggers were all over the place. They're all mucked up. So you're at home, and which is supposed to be a safe environment to sort of leave your bags at the door, but instead you're bringing that work home with you. And so the line between your role as a father, a husband, a partner, and say, for example, and a boss or a broker or whatever it is you're doing, that became really blurred because there was no differentiation in your environmental triggers. It was all one and the same. So what I found is that, for example, Starbucks sitting there on the Sunday morning was mine. I could only really write there because if it was at the office, I'd get distracted. If it was at home, I'd get distracted. So finding a place that you can purpose build for what it is you want to achieve is crucial. And I think that for me, the extreme of going to Bali was, well, I'm totally away. I'm away from everybody. It is, a significantly dedicated person that wants to get a hold of me or to get in touch with me. So it has to be important. But you find that you will gear up your life towards it. So you'll let people know what you're doing. And so they will stay away from you. And so you've got all this dedicated time and none of the usual distractions. That allows you to get so much more done in a short period of time than you would believe otherwise. And I find that it's a really good short circuit breaker as well, just to clear the decks, come back refreshed, and the sense of achievement you get when you come back from hitting something or doing something. Like when I finished writing the book and hit submit and it's all in, the feeling that I had after, 18 months of working on this thing and the let go, like the next day, until then, my friend had been having parties and having fun and I was just in the villa working 12, 14 hours a day. And then the next day he was like, I know you're saying you're going to let loose, but I kind of don't believe you, Tony, because you've come out with me after hours and then you call it, go home early because you need to sleep and work. And I'm like, trust me, like this is the first time you've come. I'm done. Tony deserves this now. Tony partied for 14 hours the next day.
Nice.
Yeah.
I really align with that. When I reflect on my life, it's the secret of success, whatever that is a series of sprints with consistency on either side. I was thinking about this a lot the other day.
That's so true.
It's like, don't deny yourself these sprints where you push yourself to extremes and then you take deep rest afterwards because it helps you recover and reflect. And either side of that, just do the basics. You can't always sustain deep flow state and, massive productivity, but you can be consistent. Just keep your fitness on track, try and stay positive, whatever practices support you. It could be gratitude. It could be meditation. It could be time in nature, connecting with friends. Keep those things going so that you chip away, but then every now and then set yourself up for some kind of mega deep sprint. And for me, there's urgency and the right conditions to get into that flow state. And it's better for me, and it sounds like for you as well, than trying to continuously achieve, a level of high performance.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. It's not. It really isn't. So one of the things I talk about at the end of every chapter is a universal truth. And so these universal truths, one of the, I guess, icons that might show or flag something as a universal truth is where there's an inherent dichotomy. So, for example, the idea that, it's this hustle culture where you have to be hustling all the time, like sleep is for the weak, etc. Now, that's to an extreme. On the other side, you've got people that in China, they call it ping pong, which is lying flat. They've given up. And so they're doing the bare minimum. They're not marrying. They're not having kids. They're just playing video games, and they're lying flat. They're done. They do not want to even try to meet society's expectations. So you've got these two crazy extremes. Now, one of the universal truths of life, I feel, it lies somewhere in the middle, which is take that lying flat time, but also hustle like an absolute weapon. Like you can do both. And it's really important to do both because of the feeling of achievement you get from when you absolutely hammer to the nail, go really hard and get something done that feels amazing. And also the deep recovery you feel when you allow yourself to relax and lie down and do absolutely nothing, even if it's just for a couple of days. So that inherent truth, when I reflect on it, really fits with even the seasons. And we kind of forget this because we don't need to harvest our food anymore. But realistically, there was a sprint. If you don't get that grain in that last season, you're stuffed. That's 9 to 10 months worth of effort down the drain. And it's not even like, autumn, you've got 3 months to harvest. No, you've got a very small window in that one place where people were burning the midnight oil, burning the candle on both ends to bring in the crops. And the rest of the time, then you've got winter. There's a bit of a rest. Not much they could do. And then after that, it's just boring consistency. And that's the part that I'm actually trying to teach my kids on, is that and I said to them, and they laughed, they went, Dad, that's gross. I said, because, they're still, 14 and 10. So they're getting to that age. But I said, fall in love with boring. Or, I'll tell other people that of an older age, I go, boring is sexy. Because that's what gets the results. The harvest is great. Like, look at me, I can harvest real quick. Wow, great. But it's the boring, it's the plowing the fields, removing the rocks, putting in the seeds, and you're not even you've done all this work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and there's not even a green shoot yet. So you go through and do all this work, and it's consistently turning up despite not seeing the results, despite not seeing your harvest yet. And then when it comes, you got to be ready. So extremes, extreme lie down, extreme stand up, and then just boring consistency in the middle.
I love it. Yeah, I was also about to go down the evolutionary angle. You beat me there. I was thinking about hunting. You go and hunt mammoths somewhere in the Scandinavia or North America, places where they used to hunt mammoths. You would probably follow one of those things for many, many days, if not weeks, before finally it's the right time, the right place. You bring that thing down. Then it's all about chopping it up and taking it back, and you relax. But for a little while, that sprint would have been pretty intense, and there's stories about it. Fascinating. So what are your thoughts, particularly around accountability and ownership? Because I know this is a topic that's important to you and it's featured in your book, but a lot of people kind of see themselves as victims of circumstance and they don't take action. And I think that's a mindset that's quite toxic for many, because they just blame all of the issues in their lives on others rather than actually just shifting and going, you know what? well, as your book is called, I am my biggest problem. Now let's focus on what we can control. So perhaps talk to us about ownership.
Yeah, so ownership, or we'll start with the lack thereof. So the lack
Yeah.
of ownership is really somebody walking away from their own sphere of control. It's them
Yes.
walking away going, like, even though it is in their control, they're just looking straight up at the sky and ignoring it, going, no, I don't want to even participate in my sphere of control. And that ownership, the very first chapter of the book says that you need to take ownership of everything you can. Because inversely, when you do that, and this goes back to that whole dichotomy, you feel the weight of the world fall off your shoulders because now you have something you can work on and something you can do. Because stress is just simply having too much to do and not enough time, or not having the empowerment to do it. So if you think about any time you felt stressed in life, it's because, you're running late for the airport. Well, guess what? Like that is a very let's call it physical limitation. Time is only so long and you need to get to the airport and you're running late. Now, what can you control? Well, you can make sure your stuff's packed, you can double check, get in the taxi, do everything you need to do, and then once you've done that, just let go. Because I don't understand when if someone's in the taxi on the way to the airport, why are they still stressing? They've
Yeah.
done everything they can. And if they're still stressing, is it because you feel like you're not going to make it? Should you call ahead and try to get in touch with the airline to rebook that? But it's that paralysis moment where they go, walk away from what they can do, walk away from what they can control, and they don't take ownership of the situation, that they really feel the most stressed. So when you do take ownership and you have done everything you can, and it's called the two-phase parts of discerning or getting rid of stress, which is, have you done everything you can? Yes, then don't stress. Have you not done everything possible? Then do that. Then don't stress. Just do it. So, I think ownership is really, really important. And that was not something, a realization that I had magically one night in the shower or something. It was Jocko Willick's Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
So, terrific book. And
Great
that
book.
was what really hammered that concept home.
Can you run through that tool again? So have you done everything? Then don't stress. If you haven't, do something. I mean, that just makes so much sense in terms of focusing your attention on what matters right now. So is it really just as simple as that? In real time, ask yourself those two questions.
100%. And that is the fundamental concept. Like, that is a perfect example of IFTTT in a stress situation. So it's following that simplistic coded sort of logic. Now that AI is becoming a big thing and people are learning prompts and so on, I think people as a generation, like my son's generation, they're going to become more familiar with these sort of coding and logic statements. Just because we're dealing with a machine learning, machines are going to be spitting info back at us. But if we give these sort of IFTTT logic statements towards things like stress, like, okay, have I done everything I can? Yes. I'm not going to stress. I've done everything I can. Am I still stressing? Maybe there is something actually that I can do. All right, well, yes, I will go and do that. In the process of doing that, I know that I'm walking towards my goal. I'm not going to stress. I'm going to let go of that. And so it's just being conscious of it. I think the biggest hindrance to IFTTT is that it's very simple. So sometimes people want to look for a magic wizard outcome that involves, crystals and special waters and maybe some herbs. But, it just comes down again back to us.
Yeah. Jocko Willink's book is really powerful for anyone who leads a team and is wondering, why do I have such a toxic workplace culture and so forth? Really, it all comes back to you as the leader and how you take responsibility for what's happened and build that foundation of trust. And you think that in the Navy SEALs, it's going to be all about, who's the most aggressive and the loudest. It's not at all. It's actually, that's not what it's about at all. It's about everybody just taking full accountability for what they've done. It's very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. And to see that at the highest levels of leadership and the highest levels of, I guess, the military, iterates what he says in that book. And then just spending that week with my friend from the Air Force, it's 100% true. Like, they describe leaders as people that, take ownership of everything and credit for some. They'll spread the
Yeah.
credit and own the mistakes. So it was another point that was heavily reinforced. And I think a lot of people make the mistake when they think about workplaces are an interesting one, because oftentimes people complain about the toxicity around them and how that affects them without thinking that, well, there are what we call the ground level leaders, which is if there's a team of 10 people all in the same role, there's still going to be a societal leader there, someone who emulates leadership. I've met teams where there was a person in the team that was more of a leader than the manager of the team. Again, going back to that ownership piece and that IFTTT, you might not have a great leader at work. Be the leader that you want to have.
And you probably will end up being the leader that they need, because leadership
100%.
is not management.
Two different things.
Management is helping someone focus their conscious attention on tasks, which does not work for me. Whereas leadership is someone who's willing to take the risks and put themselves on the line and, do and say what needs to be said.
And inspires and motivates others.
Yeah, exactly. Important. Tell me about your thoughts around imposter syndrome, particularly around it being overdiagnosed.
What I've found is our business plays heavily in the, so a bit of background, I have a finance broking business with my business partner, Luke. In the last sort of 12 months, we've been working heavily with influencers online to sort of help bridge the gap between what they're talking about, their actual knowledge, and then how can they monetize their audience, monetize their audience base. So it's a win-win for everybody. It's capitalism at its finest. But in that, there are some people that have a measure of expertise and skill in what they're talking about, and there are some that don't. And so I find that some people, they get up and talk, and they talk about, imposter syndrome, or I've seen stories or people sharing on it. I read a pretty interesting article on the topic, and it prompted a lot of thought, which was, I think imposter syndrome does occur. I'm not saying it doesn't, but probably occurs when you are inexperienced and you have achieved results, but you're not exactly sure why. So I think the biggest differentiator between imposter syndrome and someone who, I guess, is literally just winging it. There's people that would say they have it because they don't want to appear confident. At least in Australia, I'm not sure what it's like in other countries, but we have this tall poppy syndrome. Like, don't profess confidence in your abilities. Because if you do that and you say, yes, I'm actually really good at this area, people go, oh, look at him, he's just talking about himself. Or look at her, she thinks she's the top dog. It's like, no, I think it's really sad that we have that culture, because overseas, if you're good at something, people will recognize you, and you can recognize that in yourself. It's okay to recognize that you're good at something. So I think sometimes we confuse imposter syndrome with tall poppy syndrome, and we're just scared to let other people know that we are actually really good at this at a young age. I think the other area where people can sometimes say, oh, I don't want to say woe is me, imposter syndrome, but when they did accidentally get to where they are and they can't really justify or codify how they got to where they are. And that's twofold. One, it could just be pure luck and persistence. Great. In which case, okay, fair enough, probably imposter syndrome. But two, it could also be that they probably just haven't sat down and codified what they did to get there. And if they did, they wouldn't have the imposter syndrome. They'll go, oh, even though it was an accident, yes, I did all the right things to get to where I am. So why am I feeling this way?
Fact check. I remember thinking I had imposter syndrome before running resilience training workshops for companies, up until around I'd run 50 of them. And then I realized, there's no need for this imposter syndrome. And the reason why was because I just practiced it. And maybe there was a need to be less confident at the beginning because you're just learning. So give yourself space.
100%.
Don't think you're an imposter if you just haven't practiced enough.
Yes, exactly. And it's getting in the reps. So one thing that at some point, and I'm not really even sure where it comes in, as in our experience going through being a human, we have this injected fear of failure. And I'm not sure at what age that fear of failure gets injected. But when you think about it, a baby is not there going, I don't want to flip onto my tummy. What if everyone laughs at me? They'll sit there rocking side to side to side, just using every calorie in their body to try to flip onto their tummy. And then when it comes to getting up and walking, like they'll just keep falling down, keep falling down. They're not scared of falling down. They'll keep going until they get it. No baby was ever born with the ability to walk getting straight out of mum. No child ever was born and then chucked on rollerblades and rollerbladed effectively, down the street. So the idea that we have to be good at something before we start something, when did that come in?
Oh, that's crazy. It's got to be something to do with school and the way that you're suddenly put against your peers and graded. And there's this sense of, wow, you guys are amazing. You guys failed. That's not good. And then you've got to take that report home and go, I failed. And suddenly it's a bad thing when actually, as you said, celebrate it. Okay, so what are you going to do next? It's just an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, I love those quotes where it's like, I didn't fail 99 times. I found 99 ways of not doing something.
Yeah. Yeah, such a good point. So fail more is the solution.
Yeah.
And in fact, on the podcast, for anyone who's interested, I interviewed John Anderson, who's a strongman and a world famous wrestler and bodybuilder. And he said, plan to fail 10,000 times and get the failures over as quickly as possible, because otherwise you might run out of life and you didn't fail enough times to get to that one success point. So it's a good way to approach life. Stop being afraid.
100%. Was it fear isn't fatal, failure isn't final?
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned something really interesting there, which is your work with influencers. Now, I'm fascinated by this. I have imposter syndrome about being an influencer. Joke, but I only recently started posting on Instagram, and I had to go through the rationale, like, why am I going to commit to this? Am I going to make it a practice, just like going for a run? Because I don't think you can do these things piecemeal. If you're going to commit properly and allocate the time, even though it's a little bit painful at first, just like exercising can be, and wondering whether it is the right thing for me to do. But I think it is, because what do I ultimately want? I want to spread inspiring messages more widely through the podcast. And I've got this incredible content, such as this interview, where there's going to be some great clips that I'll share. But yeah, tell me a little bit about your perspective on influencers and how they can actually grow and monetize what it is that they do.
Look, I think it depends on the industry. A good example, so a childhood friend of mine, Josh, he has, I think, almost 40,000 followers on Instagram. He's done photography. When someone comes to Australia to do photos, or does a tour, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Shaquille O'Neal, Tom Brady, he's the on-tour photographer.
Really?
John Jones, the situations he's found himself and explored through that has been amazing. And so he's got this tremendous following. I see and I meet people, not just Josh, but other people who have these large followings. And then when you get a look behind the mirror and you see their lives, so you would assume we've often correlated fame with wealth, which is not. That's sometimes a correlation, but not always. Mm-hmm. So I think now that it is the easiest it has ever been to become followed and famous, that we still have this correlation between fame and wealth, which may not hold true when you get that peek behind the curtain. On the flip side, I know plenty of wealthy people who aren't famous. And so there's this knowledge gap, because the people that are wealthy know how to play with money, and the people that are famous know how to play with crowds. So my essential pitch was when talking to people and trying to find ways for our businesses to complement each other, was you have this following, you have people that are looking for value, and you're providing value. So what about providing with another layer of value, and us being, I guess, the facilitator of that, and to say, I guess, to give you a contribution towards the exchange of value here. And I think and this was after I'd read books on essentially just the better understanding money as a concept and wealth and value. So these are three, people often think value is money, money is wealth, wealth is value, but it's not. Like, they're all very different concepts. And essentially, like, money is unlimited and value is created. So when we can go to somebody who has an audience that we would complement and we can absolutely assist, if we can provide the best assistance possible above and beyond, and this is, blowing someone's mind with the level of assistance we can provide, then we have to become the no-brainer. If we can be a no-brainer option to then assist them in monetizing that audience, then perfect. So the Victor Delta Kilo company I started was originally, if we're going to go right back to the beginning, was an excuse to make my own whiskey and have my name on it.
Really?
That was the original reason. And then, yes, so that's actually under barrel, and that was just for me, and I wanted to make it tax deductible, so you got to put it under a company. And I thought, well, and this is the if this then that, well, if I'm going to do that, I might as well use my initials. And I was doing flying lessons at the time, Victor Delta Kilo. It's just the phonetics of my surname's initials. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And guess what? Well, if clothing has my brand on it, then it's uniform, and that's tax deductible. So then it was, okay, brilliant. So then I started using it to get uniform for the Victor Delta Kilo brand. It was just cool stuff with VDK on it. And then I thought, well, I'm going to write this book. I might as well do it under this. And that project kicked off then. And then I went, so what else can I do? Because all these things are taking an obscene amount of time. Whiskey is going to be there for 6-7 years.
Oh, yeah.
And then the book's going to take me ages to write. So what else could I do to add value? Because I was really post-COVID trying to find ways that, yes, finance had paid the bills and put butter on the bread, but what was my real core passion? And what I was really passionate about, and broking is a part of that, is helping people go from where they are to where they want to be. And so I would see people that would have this audience and following. I think the assumption was, when I get 100,000 followers, when I get 50,000 followers, I'll be rich. They get there, nothing's really changed. They're still pumping out content. They're still doing all these things. So finding a way to leverage that, we trialed it through our Finance Family brand, and that's worked really, really well. But on the flip side, now with Victor Delta Kilo, it's about, how do I bring, say for example, you got an influencer who they are all about physicality and sport. Well, I can host their PT course, how to get shredded in 60 days. So I can host that course. It's time released. They can do all that, for example. And then I could also host a course for a guy who's famous on the internet for budgeting. And so, for example, you've got someone who's, budgeting, and I've created these courses for them, and they host that, and it's white labeled by them. And then you can do it, because they're both Victor Delta Kilo people. Physical guy trains budget guy helps out physical guy, and it becomes like a whole series. So that's where this is heading. And so finding business pathways and linking, what I have on my side are all these businesses that have extreme value they can offer, and an inability to convey that value to this generation. And they don't know how. And so paid advertising, no good. Promoted posts, very, very low chance of success depending on the service being offered. But when you have this extreme value and you have someone with the audience that is crying out for that value, I've gone from broking loans to broking value exchange. Yeah.
That's so interesting how you've evolved in that way to help people match community and their skills with the thing that they're highly knowledgeable about. Are courses the main way of monetizing, your influence, or do you have other ways?
100%. So, for example, let's say, and there's this project I'm talking about next week with someone, but essentially you might have a company that has got a new way of doing something in a way that wants to really enhance the way they're doing it. If you're able to then take that value chain, and because some of these is non-disclosure things at the moment. So
sure.
If you take that that product or that what they're pitching, what they're doing, and you really have to be conscious of the messaging, the brand. When I say brand, what I mean is, how does it feel? How does it make people feel? What's the ethos behind it? A lot of people really put import on what is the impact that this particular value product is going to have on the economy, on the climate, on nature, all that stuff. And so you find someone who aligns with their morals and values, and really you just get people together in the same room, have a couple of drinks, or do what you like to do, and when people get along and they also feel like it's a no-brainer. It's about finding these no-brainer synergies, and then you knowing this person, you knowing that person, and just getting them in the same room to talk. Because when they talk, it becomes, you'll know if it's a no-brainer because it feels really natural. It's almost like you've just put two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle together, and it's like Step Brothers when they, that movie where, it's exactly like that. When they're both calling out that, oh, you like this as well, you like this as well. Did we just become best friends? When that happens, you've done it. You found the right match. You found the right match.
Yeah, you're really speaking to my situation. I'm thinking about starting to run some local events because I have a forthcoming book. It's called Start with Values. So you're touching on a lot of my interest areas in this conversation. And I haven't run a values workshop before. So part of my own development is because I know that there will be requests to run values workshops. And while I've got all of the knowledge, you need to practice, just as we said. So I want to start running some local events, but I thought, wouldn't it be nice to collaborate with someone who has a complementary message who could kickstart the evening or kickstart the event, and then I come in afterwards. But how do you find these people? So it sounds like you've got just that kind of connection process whereby you do help people find the right partners.
And it's just, expanding. If we go down IFTTT again, if you don't know the people, go find people. Like, where do they hang
LinkedIn.
out? What do they do? Like, go on. Like, LinkedIn's great, but it's almost like a dating app. LinkedIn's funny. It's like a dating app. Like, it's a little bit forced, a little bit artificial, but people still play nice. I find that you really need to throw yourself into your passions and your hobbies. So if you're surfing, which it sounds like you do, Brad, I would say that there are a lot of successful people that surf. Where do they surf? Go surf where they surf, and go to the coffee shops where they're drinking coffee. And then when you see that person across you at the table, just suck it up. Walk over, introduce yourself. Again, it's that fear of failure. We see people at the cafe and we go, oh, maybe I should say hi, or what if they get pissed off, or what? No, just that. And that's literally how I've lived my life, is like, I turn off that blinker that goes, what if someone doesn't like me? And I put on a smile. I go in with no expectation, and I always just start with thanking them, because usually I know them from some sort of thing I've seen online that's given me value or has inspired me or whatever it is. And I'll just say, look, thank you so much for putting that out there. It made a huge impact on me. And no one spits in a compliment's face. And being honest and genuine too, not being forced and fake, but just going out. And like you said with the hunting analogy before, you have to, it's funny, people go, I don't know how to hunt. Well, you got to know where the targets are first. And you need to know where, like if you're hunting deer, there's no point going down to the beach. If you're going fishing for sea fish, why are you in the mountains? So you got to find these locations. I think surfing is great. Bike riding is another big one. Now, both of these, no interest to me. I'm sure I could meet some really interesting people if I wanted to ride bikes. I don't look that good in Lycra. It's not my thing. Right? It's not my jam. I like going to the gym. I love whiskey. I love cigars. I love watches. So these three things, like I go hard. I go to watch things. I go to, whiskey things. And if there's an opportunity if someone's like, you free? I'm like, yes. Do you want to bond over cigars? Oh, I love cigars. Awesome. Oh, I've never had a cigar. Let me teach you. Like, please let me teach you. It is so underdone in Australia. They're great. But it's about, I guess, living your passions and your hobbies first. And one of the best relationships I have with an influencer online, not only is she an amazing professional in her own right and one of the most experienced people in her field, but I had a watch event that I had the spare ticket to. It's a Hublot, because Hublot sponsor the women's, they sponsor FIFA. So that we had these tickets. I had these tickets to women's FIFA game, and I said, Miss Influencer, we love working with you. You're amazing. I just want to say thank you. I'm going to pay for you to come down to Melbourne. I've got this ticket to the FIFA Women's, World Cup. We're going to be there with Hublot. They're going to take us out for dinner. We're going to have a good time. I didn't know that this person was an state level soccer player. And so they were like, holy crap, that's amazing. Get to see people on the world stage. And there was no idea that, oh, I'm going to get something out of this. Like, that never once crossed my mind. It was just, I've got this ticket. Originally, why did I invite this person from Sydney? Because originally the game was supposed to be in Sydney, and they asked me, would you fly up if we gave you the tickets? And I said yes, but I don't know anyone in Sydney. And I was like, well, this person's the only mad dog I know in Sydney that I'll hang out with. So I was like, hey, you want to come? And they were like, yeah. And so when they said, oh, actually it's in Melbourne, I was like, well, I'll pay for you. I don't want you to miss out on this. So it was really just about a genuine friendship, genuinely wanting to bless this other person, and building these relationships. So I think having that heart to just be a friend to others and be there for others and to make other people's lives better, just allows you to build that connection. And then when you build connection across the spectrum, whether it's influencers or business or whatever, you start connecting dots. But you need to have, more numbers on the page, more dots to connect before you can properly connect dots.
It's all about relationship. And I know in my work at Resilience Institute, people say, how do you manage to keep long-term engagements with clients? And it's really just about coming in from that place of caring, actually, really caring about them and caring more about them than the invoice that they're ultimately going to pay. So going, how can I add value to you, whether or not you decide to work with me? And that's salespeople say, well, that you can't replicate that. So how do we turn that into a process that the sales team can mirror, because it's not scalable? And that's exactly the point. It's not scalable.
It isn't scalable. It has to be genuine. It has to be from the heart. And to your point, I think that values workshop, Brad, it's one of those things that when's the best time to have started doing it? Probably, 5 years ago. And the next best time is today. Because for our business, what really pivoted and changed Finance Family from something that was on the bookshelf and not really doing much, to us giving up our first baby brand, original brand, and like Luke and I merging into the Finance Family because it just taking over, was getting a business coach and him looking us in the eye and going, how the F do you guys not have written values? Where are your values as a business? And we went, well, we value, and he's like, no, unless you have like 3 words or like 2 words, like very concise elements of what your values are, you don't really stand for anything, and you can't really build a culture on no values. So I want to take a moment to encourage you and say, please, Brad, I can't wait to see the invites for your first values workshops go out.
Thank you. I will make sure you receive an invite as well for those that are virtual, unless you feel like a short flight across from Melbourne to New Zealand.
Short flight.
There you go. There you go. Be absolute pleasure. And thank you. And I agree. I think that values really are so powerful. And if you think about overlaying values on your IFTTT process, when it comes to that moment and you've got the 3 competing priorities, or just weigh them against your values, and that can also help you gain that clarity. It's something that I really dig into in my book. It's like using your values as decision-making lenses.
And the other thing not to get confused with is simple and easy.
Yeah.
So it is a simple framework, but it's not easy, because sometimes the choices are going to be crap.
Yeah. And often it will be. It'll be the one that's going to be least comfortable. That is the right one to make based on your values.
Yep. But the best thing is that the difficulty really only lies in the decision-making process, because once the decision's made, because it's been made in your values, it's like, wow, the difference. You're flying after after you go through that.
What brings you fulfillment?
Seeing other people change for the better. The highlight of my entire year last year was realizing, so I had a client service manager join, which is like a one-to-one sort of PA. So they help me. So I'll propose a loan solution. No worries, bomb. Client service manager fulfills it. Now, one client service manager was technically excellent, had a PR person hire them for me, paid 5 figures to get this person on board. I was like, yes, I'm going to have this perfect person. And technically, they were very proficient. And so because I thought this person technically didn't need any training, they knew the role, I left them alone. That's what, I think good leaders should leave their people alone and let them do what they do best. What I failed to account for was my responsibility in coaching this person on elements of life that would matter in the workplace and at home. Because in my head, work was work, home was home. I got no leg to sort of coach this person on life coaching, right? I'm their boss. Like I'll coach them on the role, but nothing else. After 6 months, they had a mental breakdown and they quit because it's a very stressful job. And I didn't see it because I was out doing meetings and doing these things. And my business partner, to his credit, was saying, I don't think this person is going to last. And I said, Mum, when they talk to me, they're fine. They were putting on a brave face for me. And so my learnings from that was, if I'm going to have someone in this high pressure role, I need someone who is open to the idea of me essentially life coaching them through the role. Within, the universe provides. So the day that person resigned, somebody who was working for a friend of mine also handed in a notice because she couldn't get full-time there. She could only get part-time. And I went to my friend and I said, is that person any good? Because why are they leaving? Because I thought they were good. I've met them once. And she said, oh, they are good. I just can't give them the hours they need. And I said, well, is it okay if I take them? So again, just being conscious that I didn't want to appear to be, poaching anybody. So I went to my friend first and then I spoke to that person and we had them signed up in 3 days. But on the day when they came in for their first day, just to see what the office environment was like, I said to them, I need to know that if you accept this role, we're going to be having weekly and then fortnightly and then probably moving to monthly coaching. And it's going to be nothing to do. It's going to seem like there's nothing to do with loans and banks and so on. It's going to be around developing resilience and doing, making tough decisions and all that stuff. And they said, yep, sounds good. So we started with Eat That Frog. Just a great, easy book that you can just get through. And so every week or fortnight, we'd open up the book and we'd go through the book together and we talk about what we learned, how we're going to apply it in our lives at home, how we're going to apply it in our role in the office. Fast forward, so now 7 months later, it's Christmas. They've gone traveling with their fiance, now husband, and they were at the family dinner table. And when she told me this story, I cracked up and that was it. My year was done. There was nothing in 2023 that was going to top what I just heard. And this is the fulfillment piece, which was her and her partner were having a conversation around the table. Her sister was there listening, and her sister interrupted and said, have you been going to therapy? Because your communication is just so healthy. and she laughed and she just said no, and then she realized it was all the coaching we'd been doing around how to handle situations, how to respond in certain areas. And so the sense of fulfillment that someone who had known this person their whole life had seen a change in 6 or 7 months was probably also the shot of confidence in my arm I needed, that I'm not just talking waffle with this book. Because that's where I'm like, I've spoken about tech across the country to brokers. I've spoken about a range of topics. I've never spoken about self-development. But to see that, I have actually used these principles, I have actually done these things with someone, and then someone who's known them their whole life has said, like, we don't know how you've got this massive change. That was the most fulfilling thing for 2023 for me, hands down.
I love it. And do you want to know something interesting? In research we conducted last year, it turns out that the number one factor or skill supporting the most resilient people is fulfillment. So taking those moments to just recognize all of the good things, the impact you've had, the legacy you're leaving. I mean, you've changed how that person responds to challenge and how she views obstacles, and taking moments just to reflect on that boosts your resilience dramatically. And I'm sure you felt that effect. It's powerful. So be a force for good. It doesn't go to waste. That's for sure.
Certainly doesn't. So that definitely provides me fulfillment.
Nice. So how can people connect with you? Where would you like them to go to find out more about Tony van der Kerkhof?
Look, I probably share the most on Instagram. And by correlation, it will go to Facebook, but everything on Facebook is just because it's linked to Instagram. Yeah. So, if you want to message me on Instagram, that's fine. Cool. Professionally, I'm on LinkedIn. So, definitely my Bali video never made it to LinkedIn. So that's, it's not really the environment for it. Wrong dating app for that sort of video. And, but yeah, LinkedIn, Instagram. And if you're interested in anything to do with either, you can I would say start there. Don't worry about emails, schmeemails. It's too formal. If you really want to connect, just connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn.
Awesome. And make sure to check out the book. It will be in the show notes below, along with your Instagram URL. The book is called You Are Your Biggest Problem, and that's fantastic. Clear and easy steps for building the life of your dreams. Check it out. I've got it open on my screen at the moment, and I really like the structure and the outline. It's a lot of fun as well. It's written in a really engaging way. So congratulations. That trip to Bali and all of the work before that was well worth it.
Thanks, Brad. Really appreciate it.
Any final thoughts for our listeners who've stayed connected this whole time?
Yeah, look, guys, you've got, time is limited, and there's this excellent quote that eventually will be tattooed on my body, and that's, time is the coin of your life, so spend it wisely, lest you let others spend it for you.
Love it.
I think it's Carl Sandburg.
What a great way to finish up. Thank you, Tony. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've learned a lot, and we'll definitely stay in contact. I feel like there's still a whole lot more that we can unearth and discuss, so we'll make time for that in the future.
Sounds great. Thanks, Brad.
My pleasure. Thanks to you all out there, and we'll see you in the next episode. See you.